Hello, and welcome to this We're Alive edition of the Purple Journal podcast. Remember us? No? All right.
I forgot myself years ago.
Yes.
I wish I could.
I keep having flashbacks, though.
I'm Joe Johnson, host of the Purple Journal podcast, sporadically. I also own Purple PTSD and VikingsTerritory.com. I am here with Mr. Joe, put your phone away, Oberly.
Hold on. Put my phone away? Why? What should I... Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, you got it. I like the jokes that take a minute. And that our audience has no idea what I'm talking about. Joe writes for purplePTSD.com. That's a record. The Sports Post and VikingsTerritory.com. He was also over at the brand spanking new Twin Cities Orthopedic Vikings headquarters today for the... Was it the first time?
For me, yes, it was the first time, yeah. I went out there for Vikings rookie camp, and this was the one day of media availability, so it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit when we get into some of the draft stuff and the mini camp stuff. We're also here with Mr. Luke Braun.
What's up?
Heyo. Luke writes for purplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com. He's also the co-host of the Pocket Protectors podcast over on the Climbing the Pocket network, which I have actually been talking to Jason from there, and I think he reached out and wants to start posting some of their content on Purple PTSD and Vikings Territory.
Oh, awesome.
So we're all getting enmeshed,
Yeah, their
man.
content rules. That's great.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So we got that going for us, but obviously we've been away for a while, hence all of my super awkward in-jokes. We obviously wanted to come back and kind of strike when the iron was hot, and it couldn't be any hotter, at least in terms of the off-season, as the draft happened last weekend, and we held a party at Town Hall Brewery, which was actually really amazing, and I wanted to thank everyone that showed up. We had people from Iowa, from Brainerd. We had about 75 people total. It was super fun.
That's insane.
Dude, it was nuts, man.
It is.
I ended up getting we had a silent auction from one of our sponsors, which is Total Sports Enterprises, who has the exclusive contracts with most of the Vikings players. And one of the things was Diggs crossing the goal line with the ball out in front of him, the Minneapolis or Minnesota Miracle. I don't want to offend anybody since I called it the Minneapolis Miracle and somebody lost their mind on Facebook. Autographed by Diggs with a certificate of authentication. I'm going to be buried with this thing. It is like the coolest thing of all time. So
that is incredibly cool.
We had some really cool stuff.
Your bid won that?
Yeah. I was actually the last half an hour I stood right next to it and kind of shooed people away because there were a few other people that were interested in it, but I had to have it. It's honestly the coolest thing ever. But anyway, the draft happened. And before we hop into the draft, we should talk a little bit about some of the news that happened this week, and it kind of ties into the draft a little bit in regards to some of the contracts that the Vikings signed in the secondary, with Trae Waynes getting his 5th year picked up, and Terrance Newman coming back for another year, which my memory with this kind of stuff is bad, but I was under the impression that maybe he wouldn't come back, but he made a pretty clear point. I was on the conference call with the media, and somebody said, "What was the decision-making process for you?" And he said there wasn't one. I always said I was going to come back. I just had to work on the deal. It wasn't like I wasn't planning on coming back the entire time, which, again, I don't remember if that was the case. But he's coming back for a year. He did say, I'm 40, since most of the questions were about how old he was, which I think he took offense to be honest.
I can relate, okay?
Yeah. Somebody said, how is it being the oldest guy in the league now that Harrison retired? And he goes, it's exactly the same as it was before. Those were the kind of answers he was giving. So he did say, though, I'm 40 and I have to find something else to do. And when people asked what that was, he said, "I have absolutely no idea." I think a lot of people, I asked the people online, some of our writers, what I should ask him if I built up the nerve to actually ask him a question, which I did, but then I was interrupted, and then I hid and cried the rest of the time. A lot of people assume I think he's going to move into a coaching position with the Vikings just because he's obviously got such a strong relationship with Zimmer.
And Zimmer was specifically like, "We want that."
Yeah, has he said that, or is that just like a?
Yeah, last year he was like, "I would love for him to be a coach when he retires."
Right.
Yeah, it seems like it just makes a lot of sense.
It would be awesome too.
This will be a transition year to that, I think. That he's eventually going to step into that. I mean, if you've got a guy ready there that wants to hire your tailbone, and then you got, you don't know what you want to do, it's a nice bridge to whatever else you do afterwards. So.
And when it comes to Trae Waynes, I know, Joe, you and I talked on the phone earlier today. I didn't, to be completely honest, I didn't interpret it this way until you brought it up. Just because I'm such a Trae Waynes homer that I can't really look at things objectively. That the fact that they, picked up his option as opposed to extending him, mixed in with the Mike Hughes pick with the first overall pick in the draft. I mean, do you guys think, and since I kind of stepped all over Joe's take, I'll go to Luke first. Do you interpret this as a make or break year for Waynes in regards to even making the team, or just maybe like getting a decent contract?
I think he's playing for an extension right now. The secondary is in a little bit of a crossroads right now in terms of who it's going to be. But right now, I mean, we have like 4 different options for how this is all going to put together. And they're all great for the Vikings. So they've navigated the secondary really well. They've spent a lot on it. But with Waynes, I don't think Mike Hughes pushes him very much. It sounds like, they just had their first rookie training camp thing today, and it sounds like he did most of his work out of the slot. So it kind of sounds like right now Trae Waynes is the de facto CB2, and it doesn't sound like anybody's really going to push him, barring some kind of like Holton Hill miracle. But then that would be just insane. But I think he's playing for a long-term extension.
I would agree. Go ahead.
Yeah, he played down the stretch last year really, really well. Like in the last half of the season, he was excellent.
Yeah.
He was probably a top half cornerback, which is great when that's your second guy. So if he comes out in 2018 and he picks up where he left off in 2017, that'd be excellent, and there'd be no reason not to extend him because, your 2 outside corners, those are 2 of the most important guys on any team. So, lock those up when you find them. But if not, you have both Mackenzie Alexander and Mike Hughes, and if both of those guys end up being better than Waynes, which in my opinion is unlikely, but who knows? That decision's in 2019, maybe even 2020. Then you can kind of maybe try one of those 2 guys at the outside. And even though Mike Zimmer doesn't like to do that with short corners like Hughes and Alexander, they both played outside in college and were excellent outside in college. So you would imagine that it would be an easy transition for them, and then you kind of have Hughes, Alexander, and Rhodes be your 3 if you decided you want to part ways with Waynes. And the only other reason that you would part ways with Waynes is because you don't want to pay for a CB2, but that seems like you're kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face.
I would say that it's a big year for Waynes, definitely, because they didn't extend him. Not that they were planning to, but they didn't. And he's got this guy to look at over his shoulder. And it took a while for Waynes to develop. They're gonna use him this year to certainly try to develop Hughes, but and they'll take a long look at him. They'll say, is this guy worth more to us? Is his upside more? Well, then they're not going to extend Waynes. They'll say thanks and we'll see you, and they'll start grooming Hughes in it if he can make that jump. That's the thing they'll do. They'll take a really long look at him, or if that's just Mackenzie that they're. That's
my follow-up question. Luke alluded to that as well.
But I think it's really important for Waynes to, Zimmer said it again today in practice, talking about a different position, but he says we always want to create competition. So Waynes really hasn't had anybody pushing him. They brought him along slowly and really groomed him into the spot and took their time. But now it's time, if he wants a second contract, to step up and take that next leap and show that, I can be this guy and I want to be this guy. And I think having a guy like Hughes, who looked to me to be very confident on the field today, and very, granted he was with other rookies, but he looked really sharp out there and looked really good. And he's the kind of guy that can push him. As far as Alexander, the same thing. Then again, they brought in Alexander's brother to the camp today too, so that was kind of interesting.
What position does he play?
Let me see. I suspect probably.
Yeah, it sounds like Hughes and Alexander are going to compete with each other, and whoever loses that is just going to be like a swing backup kind of type. I actually think Waynes is under less competition than he's been in the past, just because every year Newman gets older. That's one year he's not pushing Trae Waynes anymore. That was really who he competed with for the first 2 years, and then he got his spot.
And I think even Newman started some games early last year. Maybe that was just in the preseason.
He rotated in the slot with McKenzie. He might have played a little outside because I think Waynes. Oh, you know what it was in the preseason? Because Waynes was hurt the whole preseason.
That's right. That's what it was. Yep.
And McKenzie's brother is a safety. So
okay.
GP family.
It's not. I mean, it was interesting to see the fan reaction to that pick. And I want your guys, before we move on from that pick, wanted to get your guys' initial reaction to that. I think people were befuddled by it. I think not only the pick itself, but I got a lot of people. I wrote a quick article about it, and I made the assumption, just based on what other writers were saying, that he would be working in the slot. And I got some comments from people like, no, he's not. He's going to be an outside guy. I think people didn't really know what to expect or what he was going to contribute. But just based on, I'll give you guys my theory out front, and I've been writing an article about this that I thought was going to be done today, but it will probably be done on Monday. I feel like the Vikings thought either they had a chance at Billy Price or, well, they were aiming for Billy Price if he was available. When he was nabbed by Cincinnati, they might have gone to best player available with the assumption that they could pick up a decent guard on day 2. There was a run on guards in the second round, if I recall correctly. There was a lot of stuff going on at the party, but it didn't seem to kind of fall the way I think the Vikings hoped it would have, at least in terms of picking up Billy O'Neill, who is, we'll get into, is a athletic freak, but a lot of people are saying is obviously a project, is going to be a tackle as opposed to a guard. Anyway, what was your guys' just impression of that pick? Do you think that might have been what happened, or was this the plan all along? I think people expected, it's Mike Zimmer, they expected them to pick up a corner for some depth, but I don't think a lot of people thought obviously they'd use a first-round pick on that position. But yeah, I didn't really hear from you guys in regards to initial reactions.
Go ahead, I missed the draft.
All right, yeah. I think they got greedy. For one, it sounds to me, and this is all reading the tea leaves of what other people have reported, but it sounds to me like they had Mike Hughes really, really, really high on their board. And it makes sense, right? He's a versatile corner. He's got all the attitude stuff that you could possibly want. He checks all the combine boxes that you could possibly want, especially for a slot corner. So I think they had him a lot higher on their board than the general draft community had him. So, people be like, oh, they reached for a position that wasn't even... No, I think they thought this dude was really, really, really good and really high on him. And then in terms of guard, I do think they got a little greedy with it, right? They said, okay, we could take a guard right now, or we could take this really good player who we think is really good and see if we can't have one slip to us at 62 or try to trade up or something if somebody falls fast enough. And then they all got taken in the first 5 picks of the second round, and they were like, oh, well, crap. So I think they got greedy and it bit them. But I don't hate that as a strategy of, trying, go get your guys, basically. It's the infamous Luke Inman quote, go get your guys. I don't hate the idea of trying to take a risk and get greedy and see if you can have your cake and eat it too. But in this particular case, they got the brunt end of it.
That's a really, before Joe, you touch on this, and I'll kick this to you. That's kind of similar to how my thought process was, in that I thought that, obviously I said they thought that they would be able to get somebody at 62. But I look at what the risk was in a larger way, I guess. I've been increasingly, I guess, just looking back at the fact that, the team, or Spielman especially, kind of ignored the offensive line position for a decent chunk of years, at least in regards to drafting above the 4th round. And I feel like when you bring in the most expensive quarterback in the history of the NFL and most expensive player in the history of the NFL, and you have an offensive line that does need guards, Berger's gone, Searles is gone. I'm looking at the depth chart right now, and there's guys I've never even heard of. I don't even know where they came from, so I didn't get a press release about it. But doesn't it seem like in this instance, when that's the context, especially, and we don't know what the team thinks, but I know, Luke, you talked about this a lot before Cousins came to town, and it's become kind of the overarching narrative I've seen from even pro-Cousins writers, and, it's something that I believe as well, and is that Cousins obviously has a problem under pressure, especially interior pressure. And so when you have that need in that context, I just feel like, why take that risk when you don't have to? It seems like such a risk-reward sort of situation that the risk is so high that now, you have a situation where, if I pulled it up, there's guys, that there's just a whole bunch of, Cedric Lane,
the guard competition,
Chris Gonzalez.
Yeah.
It's like, why would they do that when, you obviously even could have traded down maybe and picked up something.
Yeah.
It just
the phones
like,
turned off when they were on the clock. They were trying to trade down, but they didn't have any partners, or at least that's what Rick Spielman said, which I'm kind of sympathetic to.
But yeah, you just feel like take a guard and then kind of go from there, especially with them being taken almost immediately afterwards, and like you mentioned, the beginning of the 2nd round, obviously the guards were graded around that spot as well. It wouldn't have been like a huge reach to do that. It just seems like now we're in a situation where, long story short, or long story long, that I'm super concerned is my point, to be honest. I went from,
Joe.
I was so excited before the draft, and now I'm like, shit.
I agree with you. I was advocating for an interior lineman before the draft, and in fact, that's one reason I took the draft off, because I was going to be boring that first night. No, I'm kidding. But, you got 2 guys that are in that line, 2 starters from last year coming out busted ankles and in the interior, and so you when they say it was a deep draft for guards, you should have grabbed one. I guess, I think Luke said it best. They got a little greedy. Best player available came up, and who they got barking in Spielman's ear is Zimmer, who's always wants another cornerback for his defense, and it it'd been easy to say, well, we got some question marks here in our cornerbacks already, so let's grab this guy, and then they kind of got burned. You should have seen them somehow trade up to get one of these guys, and not hope that it was going to happen. But now they may be looking at moving Rummers inside.
Yeah,
I think that is what they were intending to do the whole time, and I don't like it because I don't think he's as good of a guard as a tackle. But whatever, the team feels like they could use Mike Remmers at guard. So if you swap it and say, okay, we have a right guard, but we don't have a right tackle, the draft suddenly makes a lot more sense.
So who would move to tackle then?
Tight end. That's
a Brian O'Neill, Rashad Hill competition, which I don't think it's smart, but I do think it's their plan.
Sure seems like it. Because I put an athlete like O'Neill out there, that he's got a high learning curve, but I think just listening to him speak today and see how articulate he was, and there was definitely some intensity there. If they can get him the size they need him, they're going to have a very active and mobile line, and I think that's something that can work, but it's not the gamble you want to take when you're one game away from the Super Bowl, I guess, last year.
Yeah.
So,
I think they feel really good about Remmers at guard. It's interesting. It's like there's a difference between having a plan that everybody doesn't like, or it's a plan that I disagree with, but it's a plan. It's not like they're just saying, we'll shake out however it shakes out, and we don't really care about it. It's, no, we care about it. Here's our plan. this plan just maybe sucks and you don't like it. That's two different things. And I also think that, their idea of having this really mobile line, this like moving parts, that helps you change launch points and it helps you really mess up pass rushers. So just the fact that they can move around and do all that, and Kirk Cousins has enough mobility to move around. I mean, he doesn't have a great sense for pressure, but he can move when asked. He can do like a bootleg if you ask him to. I think that's going to be the offense that shakes out of this. There's a lot of horizontal motion in the pass game, a lot of moving pockets and moving launch points and stuff, which is really fun. And that's actually one of the kind of core concepts that made Shermer's offense so successful. And I hope they're just taking that right into 2018.
I think you're right, Joe. You invest that much in your quarterback, you want to protect him because after that you've got Trevor Siemian and Trevor Siemian.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see an offensive lineman taken at the end of the first round.
I would have taken Connor Williams and run home happy.
I just Googled because I remember us talking when the Vikings shaked up the offensive line before the Saints game in the playoffs, and thinking of I was trying to remember what they did there, and how that might look. And I'm just looking at, they're talking about the discrepancy between Remmers at guard as compared to Remmers at tackle in regards to his Pro Football Focus grades. And obviously they're going to have a lot more time to practice this. I think, obviously doing that with just the bye week before the Saints
probably
game.
Be at right guard, too. He was at left guard in the playoffs replacing Easton. And I think you'll probably have Easton at left guard and Remmers at right guard, which is an easier switch to right guard from right tackle than left guard because you don't have to switch your footwork.
Totally.
I think by game 3 comes around, they're going to fly a helicopter to wherever Joe Berger lives and try to see if we can
get Brad Childress down there.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what I said on the phone with you earlier today, Joe. I was like, God, they got to try to get Berger to come back. Please. We should hit him up on Twitter. But yeah, we talked a little bit about Brian O'Neill. And Joe, you got to meet him today. We've alluded to it a little bit, but what was your impression of him? Both, you touched on the passion in his voice,
Yeah, I guess that's right out of the gate. I mean, you're not seeing these guys. It was after a walkthrough, so they just had their jerseys on, and they weren't as big as they usually look. But he did not impress me as the 297-pound guy that it says on the roster I was given today that he is. He looks like a really awesome tight end. A really guy that would be tough to tackle, but one writer asked him if what he thinks about all the people talking to him about not being able to contribute until the second year, and I would say there was a slight bristle to that question, but not overly much. He just said that's their opinion and they're entitled to it. But all I care about is what the Zimmer, Sperano, and DeFlippio, can't say his name, whatever they have to say. And he said, if they want me to put on weight, I'll put on weight. If they point out my weaknesses, want me to fix it, I'll fix it. I'm going to do what they say. And so I like the attitude. Very articulate. I think he's, I would love to see them at some point, make this work and get him in the game and throw him a pass. It's funny that he's had rushing attempts in college too as a
left tackle. It's the future.
It's crazy, but it's another one of those. He fits the mold of the mobile line that they want to have, but you worry about his size, holding off some of these guys that are coming in full bore at him. But he's an athlete, and hopefully we'll make up for that. I'm excited to see what he looks like when OTAs start and he's lining up to some, when someone like Daniil Hunter or Everson Griffith coming around the corner, because I'm sure he'll get some time in the first string after a while. So that'll be the tail of the tape for me right there.
So is the plan to have him play right tackle?
I think he's the right tackle of the future, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's what they want. And when he gets on the field is another question entirely of the immediate. But I think by the end of this year and into next year, they want him to be the right tackle of the future.
Yeah. That's too bad because I would love to have someone you can plug into that line right. Just like they did with Elflein, I mean, he was. You could have
had Connor Williams plug right in at right guard, have Remmers play at right tackle, do that for a year while he gets acclimated to the NFL, learns new footwork, kind of there's some things Connor Williams had to clean up that you could clean up, and then you kick him out to right tackle in his second year, cut Mike Remmers to save money so you can continue to extend everybody, and you'd be made.
Right.
That makes me sad.
But I mean, hey, they have a plan, and it's a coherent one. It's just one that I disagree with. But with Brian O'Neill, he's a tough person for me to evaluate because he's only been an alignment for 3 years, which is like, oh crap, we got another like recent position convert, athletic tackle from Pitt.
Yeah,
that's exactly TJ Clemmings.
That's everyone at the party. Like literally, the tone got dark, and I just kept hearing TJ Clemmings 2.0. Oh my god.
Yeah. He's making a much lesser switch, right? Because as a tight end, at least you're learning blocking throughout all the time. You're just not doing it as much. With TJ Clemmings, he had never thought about blocking in his life before his sophomore year of college. And Brian O'Neill picked up things pretty quickly at Pitt. He picked up lineman, outside tackle footwork. His footwork is actually pretty polished for a guy who's only been doing it 3 years. He hasn't picked up handwork yet, so he lets guys get right up into his chest, and he gets blown back. He can anchor fine because he's that athletic enough to, but in the NFL that might not be true. And if somebody does a good speed to power rush, is actually something both Griffin and Daniil Hunter are really, really, really good at. So he's going to get his butt whooped in OTAs right away. That like a good speed to power NFL rush is going to totally blow him away, and he needs to learn how to get his hands in the right place so that he can learn to fight that. But what he can do is get to any spot you want on the field. So if you think of the NFL offense as a board game, and instead of linemen you have 5 brick walls that are immovable and you can put them anywhere on the field, that is what Brian O'Neill is. I mean, he's movable, but you can put him anywhere on the field from the snap. You can ask him to get to pretty much anywhere, and he can do it, and that's pretty valuable. It's just a matter of getting, like you've been talking about, Joe, getting his play strength up and getting his weight up and getting his hands trained to fight off really aggressive punches from defensive linemen, speed to power long arm rushes, and stuff like that.
And so I'm looking at his mock draftable graph, and it says he has like really, really small hands. Does that have anything to do with what you're talking about?
I don't think the size of them matters. It's more about him knowing where to put them for.
Tell my ex-girlfriend that. Ayo.
And it's more important
it's
less important than having short arms for a lineman. I think small hands.
Right.
It says he has short arms too.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he does. That's not quite as important to me for a tackle because I think you can have short arms, and so long as you hit him in the chest in the right place, you can win the leverage battle. He also has a really bad pad level problem, meaning that he doesn't get his shoulders low enough, and that means that in lineman leverage in the trenches, low man always wins. It's easier to push up on someone than push down on them, and he's always finding himself pushing down on people because he's got a pad level problem. Okay. Those are the things he's going to have to work out, and those are the reasons that everybody says don't start him right away because he has these like fatal flaws. But those are also things that like many alignmen have come into the NFL and learned. It's not like teaching a quarterback generally accuracy. It's possible to teach those things and get rid of those habits with alignment. He just has to do it, and it's going to be a long process.
I like I said in my story, his attitude, his intensity is going to help him too. I mean, he looks like he's ready to learn. He wants to learn it. He takes a little umbrage at this thought that, well, everything that Luke basically just said, and he's ready to prove somebody wrong. And I think he's the kind of guy that's going to pick up stuff quickly, be a really smart guy and leader possibly on that line when he gets his techniques down. And he could turn out to be really good. It's funny how Vikings keep drafting guys that are kind of projects that we certainly know what happened with Daniil Hunter, and he's turned into a monster. He was a raw talent that needed technique work, and he's done great things for him. So that's what they believe as coaches. Zimmer wants a staff that teaches and develops players, and I think they maybe feel that they have the luxury to do that for a little while with this guy, and maybe that's what will happen.
Yeah.
He was very productive at Pitt as well. I think when you get those raw guys and then they get their butt kicked every time in college, and then you take them and say, I can teach them how to play football, that doesn't work out as well. But when you see him say, okay, those are some technique flaws we're going to have to fix, but he's winning still, that you can work with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into the offensive line a little bit more. Because obviously they picked up a guard from Appalachian State. But let's talk about Jalen Holmes from The Ohio State University. You know me and my Big Ten guys. So always happy about that. Kind of seems like the word on him is that he was overshadowed by like all those superstars that he played next to, the Bosas and whatnot. But Luke, what was your thoughts on him as a prospect, and then just in regards to how you think he'll kind of fit in on that line?
Yeah, so the issue with being overshadowed with all those guys, it's not that like, oh, he didn't get any of the attention, right? Because everybody gets attention in the draft process. It's that he lost out on a whole bunch of reps because he was stuck behind like Nick Bosa and all of these like super blue chip superstars. So he didn't get enough reps to really like hone his craft. So he comes in with a distinct lack of pass rushing moves. You know, pass rushing is kind of like pro wrestling. You have to have a few like go-to moves that help you win.
I read that he goes to his spin move too often.
Yeah, and he doesn't really convert speed to power very well. Speed to power, in my opinion, is one of the best moves you can have, where you rush up really fast and kind of get the tackle moving and off balance, and then you immediately just crash into them, and then they get their butt kicked. Everson Griffin is amazing at this, and Danielle Hunter's amazing at this. But Danielle Hunter wasn't very good at it coming out of LSU, and Danielle Hunter also didn't have like any pass rush moves at all coming out of LSU. It's actually a really similar pick, in my opinion, to the Danielle Hunter one. And what's good about Jalen Holmes as a pick in terms of the situation he's entering is that he just needs to be a rotational guy. He just needs to be good enough to produce on 20% of the snaps just to spell Hunter and spell Griffin, because, you know, down the stretch last year, those two guys had taken way too many snaps, and they were just totally gassed by the end of the season. If you can get a better rotation than like Stephen Weatherly, which I think he can be pretty quickly, just based off of his athleticism alone, then you can kind of have him as the rotational piece, and then in the distant future, when Everson Griffin starts to get old or maybe not be worth the contract anymore, or if you have something happen to Danielle Hunter where you don't want to keep him anymore for some reason, he becomes then an option to try to, be a bigger part of your long-term future. But in the immediate future, he just needs to be a rotational piece. So he's got a lower bar to clear, and that means it's going to be a lot easier to mold him. And also, I don't know, I trust Andre Patterson with anything defensive line. He's a master.
When is Danielle Hunter's contract up? I thought he was part of that whole.
Yes.
If we sign Cousins, you have to pick someone to cut, and then
he's, I believe, in a contract year.
Yes, he is.
Okay.
He and Diggs and Kendricks was, and then he got extended.
Okay. Did you see him today, Joe, at the OTC? Is that what everyone's calling it?
Danielle Hunter? No. Oh, you're talking about Jalen.
Jalen Holmes, yeah.
I didn't notice him. They weren't doing a lot in that regard. So I saw him there. He spoke to the media at one point, but I was doing Zimmer at that time, so I didn't get to hear him speak. But so no, I really don't have much intel on him.
We'll get into the tight end they picked up, but I wanted to talk about all the spicy drama surrounding Daniel Carlson and Kai Forbath's response to it. It seems like he made it known, I think, before the draft that he was upset that the Vikings were even considering taking a kicker, and then obviously taking a kicker in the 5th round is sort of a statement, that you like the guy that you're taking, and that you're obviously doing that for a reason. Forbath has been good for the Vikings, but obviously he has problems with his extra points, and that's something that just you really can't have. I guess the Vikings have kind of validated that. So, what were your guys' thoughts on that? I mean, were you surprised at all?
It was really interesting today. I walked out to practice that Carlson was kicking, and the long snapper, Nick Dooley, had number 48 on, which was Cullen Loeffler's old number, I believe, and he was snapping to a holder that I didn't know who it was because I was mesmerized by his face. He looked just like Blair Walsh. It was just so bizarre. I asked several writers, I said, is that Blair Walsh out there holding for Carlson? He goes, yeah, sure looks like him. And so I don't know what his number was, but I should probably find that out. But, Zimmer addressed it after practice, saying that, asked him if they were bringing him in to put pressure on Forbath, and he said no. He goes, there's plenty of time for that. He says, we're just trying to create competition. And he said, Kai Forbath has done real well this spring, so that's the kind of thing that needs, I think. Put the guy under pressure and make him kick for his job and see if that's the guy to go with. But when you take a fifth rounder at that position and a kicker that a lot of people liked, that speaks volumes. So it should be interesting to watch that battle.
And is there any reality where we go into the season with 2 kickers then?
No.
Okay.
Someone's getting cut. And it's not unheard of for fifth rounders to get cut. That's happened before.
Fifth rounder?
It's obvious. Fifth round. It's obviously not ideal. It's like there's been like 4 fourth round cuts in the last 3 years. Willie Beavers was one of them, or in the last many years, and Willie Beavers was one of them.
Hooray.
But there's been a handful. There's usually a person or two from every fifth round that gets cut. And you hope that they don't have to do it, but if Daniel Carlson comes in and he's just totally slumping and he's got the yips because he's in the NFL and you have to cut him, then that wouldn't be something that is completely unheard of. But I have a lot of really strong takes just around taking kickers in general. And essentially the argument is it doesn't matter how good you are as a kicker. You can only be so much better than average because the average team only kicks 30 field goals a year. Extra points are only worth 1 point. Therefore, they are inherently not that valuable, even though they are probably the easiest points. They're still just not that valuable. If you missed every extra point, it actually wouldn't hurt you that bad. Versus, messing up third downs or turning the ball over, other things that happen over the course of a game. So essentially, it doesn't matter how good your kicker is. You can only squeeze so much extra value out of that, and it's never really worth a draft pick. And I actually have an article coming out soon that is going to explain that in more detail. It sounds like this dude is like the second coming of Sebastian Janikowski.
Yeah.
From what people talk about him at Auburn, although he slumped a little in his senior year, which sounds super Blair Walshy, and I don't know. It feels like we've learned no lessons from from the Vikings kicker troubles of the past.
Thank you for saying that, because this might sound familiar, and maybe I'm giving up my cards away here, or showing my cards, but watching it with my dad at the party, he goes, another kicker from the SEC, don't they learn anything? As if those two things really...
It's the nature of the position. I think I have no problem with them taking them either because you have to keep checking this out. It is an important part of the game, and it can win and lose games for you. But it is remarkable, as we're sitting there talking today, to think that Blair Walsh is not on a team. And that guy set an NFL record in his rookie year, was All-Pro or maybe Pro Bowl, I can't remember. And he just precipitously went downhill year after year, and now he's out of the league. It's crazy. I mean, that guy's physical prime, but he's not in the NFL.
Kicking is like golf. Everybody has slumps. In golf, if you have a slumpy round, right, that's maybe you had 20 bad shots over the course of a round. If you have 20 bad kicks, you're out of the league.
Yeah.
So it's like golf, but you only get 3 chances to mess up. So
and it's golf. It's like golf that a mental thing can your career.
Absolutely.
I mean, Blair Walsh is basically Ian Baker Finch, or something. It seems like, but I remember talking to Ryan Longwell. I did a story on him from Minnesota Golfer magazine, and that we sat there for the longest time just comparing how being a kicker is just like a golfer, and Longwell is really good at both. And it's fascinating because it is muscle memory, and it's just this thing that you have to get through repetition. And boy, as a golfer myself, not a golfer on any great level, but as soon as it gets in your head, you're toast.
And man,
that bears out analytically too. If you look at all the examples of kickers who missed high-profile kicks, like Blair Walsh, Scott Norwood, even Gary Anderson, although Gary Anderson's was mostly attributed to age. But all the guys who missed huge kicks, they were out of the league within 2 years, and almost every time. And their field goal percentage took huge dips. It really is kind of proven to great degrees of rigor that it's a mental thing. And that's why I kind of say, it doesn't matter how good you are because you can whiff one kick which even good kickers are going to whiff one kick, and it can totally throw you for a loop.
Right. You don't get 4 downs on a kicker. You get 1 down.
You get 1 down.
And
right?
that's the difference between the golf thing, too, is if you have like a bad, let's say, first 9 holes, you can turn it around just because you have more opportunities to do it, whereas obviously with the kicker, you're sitting there and you're thinking about it for so damn long, and then you have to go out there. I have a lot of empathy for kickers. It
right.
just seems like
so drafting a kicker who's supposed to be the best kicker of however many, like, this good of a kicker doesn't really help you because one bad kick and he can immediately turn to somebody who's as bad as Blair Walsh, and that's not his fault at all. That's just the nature of the game.
He does come in without any scar tissue, though, which is Forbath is probably wearing a little bit of scar tissue from seeing the grimace coming off the field after another missed extra point. So this guy he's got a clean slate in his brain until that first miss.
Sure, yeah. Also with his extra points too, those are kicked from the 2, not the 15. So he's going to come out and have to make the same adjustment that every kicker struggled with in 2015 when they moved it back.
Right.
Who was that kicker that was it Tampa that took that kicker in the second round?
Oh my God, Robbie Aguayo, who
there
is
you go.
Immediately out of the league because the pressure was too great.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, big difference between doing that and picking someone in the 5th. Picking him in the 2nd was inexcusable and, in my opinion, a fireable offense.
Yeah, that's crazy. When did Janikowski get drafted?
The year 2000. Everything was different. There were no Houston
Was
Texans.
that the 2nd round though?
The 1st.
Oh my God, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, Al Davis picked a kicker in the 1st, and people still argue that it was bad because it didn't help them not be bad for that entire time.
I'm surprised. Let's talk about Colby Gorsett really quickly. The guard, they picked it from Appalachian State since we obviously delved into the offensive line and all that. What are you guys' thoughts on him? Do you think he can kind of, I guess to make this hyper selfish and personal, lower my anxiety about this offensive line?
Well, he's not from the Big Ten, so he's no good, right, Joe?
Well, Appalachian State beat Michigan, so I guess they got that going for him.
There you go.
But yeah, I know I read Michael Rand's piece, which was essentially the Vikings better hope that Pro Football Focus is wrong, and he was basically looking at the reaction from Pro Football Focus in regards to both O'Neal and Gorsett, and basically saying that they were graded a lot lower than they got picked, and he was not being overtly negative, but he was saying he just didn't understand what they were doing. Luke, did you have any, takes on this guy? Do you think that he'll be able to I guess the best question is, will he be able to contribute?
Hopefully not.
He has a path to, just because of the lack of competition at guard, assuming that they aren't just like dead set on moving Rimmers to guard, which I don't think they are. I think if there's somebody comes in at guard and plays really well and they have the luxury of moving Rimmers back to tackle, they'll do it. But otherwise, I mean, he has to be basically a better guard than Rashad Hill is a tackle, which is a clearable bar even for a late round rookie if they really come on, like Ben Gedeon style. I know he's athletic and he has, he checks the same combine boxes where he'd be able to fit in and slot in and move around just as well as anybody else. He obviously has a whole bunch of super fatal issues, which is why he went into the 5th round, like from a technique perspective, and that's going to be why Pro Football Focus doesn't like either of these guys. Although from a production perspective, it's PFF's charting that actually gives me the take about Brian O'Neal being productive at Pitt. So it's interesting that they're ignoring their production in favor of like traits, which is not very PFF-y. But that's, I don't know, that's interesting. And it's it's a bunch of different people. It's like 30 people over there. They're not going to all have the same opinion. But yeah, with Gorsett, I think he has to beat out Tom Compton and a bunch of undrafted nobodies and like something called a Jake Andrews. He could do it. He probably won't. He'll probably just be another Danny Isidora, which it's good to have those kinds of players. I think on Arif's consensus big board, he was the best pick by value on that, meaning he was the one of the only 2 people we selected in the whole draft that are rated above the selection that we picked him at on the consensus big board. So I would say if PFF dislikes him that much, PFF is in the minority compared to the rest of the draft community.
Okay. Did you see him today, Joe?
No, sir.
Well then, let's go back a few rounds and talk about Tyler Conklin, who is from Central Michigan.
He made a nice catch today.
He, I guess, was a basketball player for a year in college, and then he switched over.
Right.
So you think he would be got good ups?
It was a leaping grab. It was a leaping grab downfield behind the defender. It was nice. I had to say, who is this guy?
Is that his MO? Is he more of a Bucky Hodges type, in regards to like his blocking?
He's a move tight end. He doesn't block.
Okay.
He was wearing Michael Pruitt's number, and I called him the new Michael Pruitt. But
yeah, well, he's kind of take 3 at that, right? Because Michael Pruitt was the first stab at it, and then Bucky Hodges was another stab at it. They really want to get one of these athletic move tight ends in the late rounds to work out.
Yeah, I was really hoping that they might go after the gopher with Nate Wozniak that's like 8 feet tall.
you were hoping they'd sign Boehringer again, but
I heard Mobo's making a comeback.
he is. He's on Cincinnati.
He's trying out for the Bengals.
You know?
Well, the Bengals have like a special international exemption on their practice squad, so they can keep him at no cost. Which is a different setup than what we had.
How does that work?
It's like if you have it all 4 AFC North players have an 11th spot on their practice squad, but only for international players.
All 4 NFC
So the Bengals
North
chose
teams?
Mobo.
Yeah.
AFC North teams.
How that's weird that they have that and other teams don't.
It's like an experimental thing.
Okay. So I just realized that we need to do a deep dive on Mobo again. I'm telling you, Thielen's looking over his shoulder as we speak.
Yep.
Oh my God, that might be my coldest take in 2016. I thought Thielen was like on the roster bubble.
I literally said on the air that Thielen was a good special teams guy and a hard worker like Chris Walsh, but his time was up and Mobo was the future.
And who didn't have that take?
Nobody.
That would be
You
me.
patted me on the back and you said, "You know what, Joe? I look up to you."
Don't you dare! I told you.
Have you seen Doctor Strange when he looks at that lady and says, "Teach me"? After I said that take, you looked at me and said exactly the same thing. Teach me.
No.
Teach me your ways.
I told you that Zimmer loved Adam Thielen, loved the way he practiced, loved the way he played, and all the guy did was make great catches. So I told you, he's a Mankato guy. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, there you go. But
yeah, Conklin's a move tight end. He should be. Hopefully, he can be tall in the red zone. That's what we're kind of lacking, and we kind of have anything we could possibly want in pass catchers except for height. Okay. And he adds height. So if you wanted to put him in a sub package, I want to say he's 6'3" or 6'4".
I thought he was 6'6", but maybe I'm thinking of Wozniak.
Maybe he is
6'9".
I'm actually not sure.
I'm gonna look it up.
Let me look it up.
I looked up a lot of guys today, so
yeah, let me look it up.
Okay.
So we can move on.
So does cold take mean that you were wrong, and hot take means that you're right? Or
A hot take is like an unpopular opinion.
Yeah, spicy.
Yeah.
Like,
a cold take is that take that heated take has now gotten really old, aged poorly, and cooled way down, and now it's just a bad take in hindsight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Needed to get this millennial terminology now. Thanks, guys.
6'4".
He is 6'4". Okay, yeah.
So
that's nice and tall. Go be tall in the red zone. Go throw that face mask or higher, and Kirk Cousins can hit that window, and then hopefully he can contribute in the red zone, and that would be huge.
So
I still think that Kirk Cousins is the quarterback. That's just bizarre.
Isn't it?
It
Anyway.
still looks wrong to me every time I see him like with the Vikings logo behind him on NFL Network. It's like weird. I'll get used to it once I see him in a helmet.
Yeah. Got to see him on the field, then it will begin to sink in.
In his Cousins jersey, doing the whole thing, like actually playing. Then it'll make more sense.
Playing behind cardboard cutouts on the offensive line while they have 8
I was
first-round picks at the corner.
I was reading today about how somebody, I can't remember who it was, darn it, but he was saying that the Vikings, only, I guess it was some place that had dropped the Vikings in their power rankings, and saying that they only mildly upgraded with Cousins over Keenum. So should be interesting to say, even though we'll see what happens there. But that may be something to keep our eye on all year. And, of course, the thing is, though, with going from Simeon to Keenum out in Denver, they're going to make probably a bigger leap than the Vikings will by going from Keenum to –
maybe, unless Keenum was magic in a bottle and the Vikings are right about him.
Correct.
I saw a lot of that too, Joe. People saying, like, just even adding, let's say, 300-400 yards to the passing game isn't going to be enough of a differentiating factor to move the team up in regards to wins. Like, I think they said it went from 10-6 to 11-5. That was one of the articles that I read.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a much smaller relationship between like total passing yards and wins too, because often when you're winning games you aren't passing, so the volume goes down. So I've had the take that like this is the year Kirk Cousins doesn't cross 4,000 yards and we're all going to be happy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I said something a few weeks ago where I said if Cousins gets 5,000 yards, that's really bad news.
Yeah, it's horrible. That means we're 3-13.
And yeah, exactly.
And we're behind in every game.
And Dalvin Cook is hurt again.
But if he does and they lose, he will still go in the locker room and say, "You like that?"
I would be like, "No, Kurt."
Man, there's a lot of we can still talk about like Devontae Downs and Aruna. Was there anything in particular you wanted to touch on with those guys? I know Millard had something to do with Aruna getting on the team.
He trained with Keith Millard, which is really fun.
Right. Downs didn't get to do much today because he's still rehabbing his knee, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah. Downs was basically Anthony Barr at Cal, is the way I understand it, and then he blew out his knee, so nobody knew if he was good. He wasn't like that good in the first place, but he can be like a rangy kind of Mike linebacker type, which would be awesome.
They got him practicing at Mike, but he said they wanted him to learn all three positions, and someone brought up
that makes sense.
Anthony Barr to him, and he got a big smile on his face. I'm hoping that guy will teach me something, he said. So that was cool.
He's got the build that he could be that kind. He could be, as rangy as Anthony Barr and as physical as Anthony Barr, but also cover like Eric Kendricks. If he, in the perfect world where he develops the way he should and his knee is fine and everything, but there's too many question marks that make him a high draft pick. He also was a leadership figure at Cal, which is awesome. And in terms of Adi Aruna, he's kind of the same thing as Jalen Holmes. He's just raw and athletic, but more raw and a little less athletic.
Big body though, right? Pretty good sized lad.
Yes.
Zimmer was talking about that. He kind of got it. Said yes. He says he fits. Repeated it a couple of times. I think he. Yeah.
Figures to be an edge rusher, I think, but he rushed all over the defensive line too, which is important to Zimmer. Because if you say he's the best depth, he ends up being the best depth player. Like he develops really well, and he's the best depth player on the whole DL. That means no matter who goes down, you have him as the backup, and that's really valuable.
So with them taking a few defensive linemen, do you think this is the end of Brian Robinson? Did I miss something? He might have retired while I was gone on vacation.
I think you can only get so many. Dude, it's 35. How many snaps can you rely on him for?
I know it. It's
probably his last year.
Well, I would think for sure it's his last year, but I wonder if he makes the team at some point, they may not have room on the roster for him.
That could be a surprise cut. I mean, he was excellent for the last 3 years of his career, but he's at his age. I mean, if you can only get 10 snaps a game out of him, is that really worth a roster spot?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that'll be interesting to watch as well.
And they were limited last year in how much they could rotate him in, which ended up having a ripple effect across the entire line, and then that showed up in the NFC Championship.
Right.
So it's already become a liability. It's only going to get worse as he gets older.
We will have to keep our eye on that. It would be sad for all us media types who are in the locker room because he's been there.
Yeah, he calls into K-Fan every Monday morning.
Good dude.
Yeah, I hope he stays with the organization because he's such a great guy. He's a leader, too. That would be a loss of a leadership figure in the locker room.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking kind of at some of the other headlines, and it says ESPN says the Vikings picked up 2 of the top 10 undrafted free agents, according to Todd McShay. I know they picked
according to most people.
I know that they picked up a lot of receivers. A lot of people were psyched about what's his name, Weineke out of South Dakota, saying he's like Adam Thielen type.
Yeah, he's a hometown white receiver.
There you go. That's all you need.
They also had Don Beebe.
I'm an Adam Thielen type.
Don Beebe's kid was at practice today, and he's
this has been a tryout.
Yes, and he could move. There's no two ways about it, and it would be fun to see him. What was Mark Craig was saying that he's the not in that family is probably the only two only family in NFL with somebody on, if he made the roster, on both teams that are 0-4 in the Super Bowl. And I said, yeah, that's what comes from someone from Cleveland, because that's how they got to hang on to. So.
Yeah, there's a bunch of undrafted free agents. Actually, Mike Dory, who writes for us, writes about the draft for us, wrote about 4 undrafted free agents he was excited about.
Yeah.
The 2 that I think Todd McShay probably liked and that everybody liked a lot are Hercules Mataafa,
Yep.
who is he played defensive tackle I think it was Washington State, but he's way too small to be a defensive tackle at the NFL, so he has to learn a new position, which is why he went undrafted. So they're probably going to try to teach him how to cover, which is going to be really hard to just learn how to cover from scratch when you were like a 3-tech. So we'll see if that ever translates, and that's somebody that everybody's excited about, but I wouldn't be surprised if, all right, this dude can't cover it all, we can't put him on the team.
Zimmer made that comment. It's going to be quite the transition for him, but he just did say, I think you could do already. He goes, I like those guys from Washington State, because I think Zimmer said he goes, I was out there, I know those guys. So.
Yeah. And then the other one is Holton Hill, who is, if he hadn't failed like 10 drug tests at Texas and also allegedly won at the combine, although he denies that, he probably would have been like a day 2 prospect.
Ooh.
And like some people would even put him in like the top 40. Like he's a good player. It's just a matter of staying out of trouble, which you don't know. And I think the fact that he fell all the way out of the draft and the Vikings never drafted him and instead were drafting like Adi Aruna and Devontae Downs, who's a blown out knee, over him, probably tells me that I didn't really believe Mike Zimmer when he was like, well, we did our homework and we think he's a genuine guy. Like, well, you probably would have drafted him then.
Yeah.
Because if you draft him in the 6th round and you're confident that he's not going to get in trouble and he doesn't get in trouble and you're right about that, it's like the steal of steal. It's a Richard Sherman level steal of the draft.
How do you know that they can't just sit and wait on him, though, if they know that he's drafted so precipitously that, because they did step up their work that they did on for undrafted last year. They said they made a point of that. So I don't know. You can't.
Well, think about it. If you interview the guy, right, and you come to the conclusion, okay, we think this dude's clean and he made some mistakes, but he's learned from them, you probably can assume that other teams are getting that same impression.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you really would be able to trust you. Like, you would probably want to just go get him instead of, like, the kicker.
No, that's my point, though. They probably don't trust him. It's worth a fly.
Okay, yes.
As an undrafted free agent rather than taking up, one of the earlier picks. I don't know. It all depends. They said they spent a lot of time talking to him, so.
Yes, and there's also a number of undrafted free agent running backs, all of which are really interesting. My favorite is Rock Thomas?
Yeah.
Rock Thomas, yeah. He's like a very scat back, kind of take over the Jerick McKinnon role, be a pass catcher on 3rd downs and stuff. I'm pretty excited about seeing him. And that 3rd running back position is wide open. Right now it's held de facto by like Mac Brown. Like, it's anyone's game.
Yeah, that's a really good point, man. I know we talked a lot about McKinnon and whether or not it was a good idea for him to kind of go somewhere that would give him more money and an expanded role, or less money here where he could probably,
stay healthy.
Yeah, and have a longer career, not just from health, but in regards to maybe, if he's not going to produce at the level that the 49ers expect, even though they're really high on him. Apparently, I guess their head coach was watching tape of him for like hours and like freaking out about how underutilized he was as a Viking, supposedly.
He was underutilized when everyone was healthy, but I think 3 of his 4 years here he ended up being a starter.
Yeah,
right.
Peterson was either hurt or suspended, or Cook got hurt.
So we'll see, but yeah, that's a really. I just wanted to say that's like a super interesting camp battle, since that was on the list, was just battles ? Seeing what else is going to happen at that 3rd spot.
Yeah, the other camp battle I think is really interesting is that final wide receiver spot.
Yeah.
Because right now it's basically held by like Stacy Coley. If they're going to keep 6, if they're going to keep 5, it's probably just like the big 2: Diggs, Thielen, Kendall Wright, Treadwell, and Tarvis King, or whatever his name is, from the Giants. King. That's probably your first 5. And then if they want to keep a 6th, it's Coley and a million undrafted free agents, and then like some other random guys. It's like really this totally wide open battle. Probably one of them or 2 of them end up on the practice squad too. So there's a lot at stake for those undrafted wide receivers ended up in a pretty good spot in terms of their ability to like actually make it onto the team.
Didn't Coley get suspended the first 4 games?
Was that Coley? I know it was Brothers and...
Yeah, I think it was.
It was Coley?
Yeah, I think which may have written his walking papers if that's the case. And Rodney Adams is not on the team anymore, right?
I believe he retired. He was a Giant for a little while.
Coley got
and then
caught.
He retired.
Yeah, I think it was Coley. I have to look it up.
So I do want your guys' opinion since we're talking about the wide receiver position, and there was a lot of talk of the Vikings perhaps getting Terrell Pryor because they pursued him in 2016, and he took that one. I'm going to bet on myself for a year and get more money in free agency. Obviously, he was playing with Kirk Cousins, and they were on the same page, so that didn't make a whole lot of sense. But the logic behind it was that the Vikings need a true, down the field 6'3", 6'4" type receiver that can jump up and, like you said, Luke, earlier, height in the red zone is something that the team struggles with. That's kind of been my argument in regards to the Vikings. Maybe, I know you guys are gonna laugh at me, but re-signing Michael Floyd just because I feel like
Jesus,
he's. I'm not giving up on my excitement because I'm stubborn and relatively stupid, but I feel that if that's the case, then I could see him. I just feel like the dude produced at a relatively high level, and he's not that old, and he'd have Kirk Cousins thrown to him, and he'd obviously have the preseason. He wouldn't be suspended for the first 4 games, which kind of hurt him a little bit, obviously, here. But do you guys, I guess the general question is, going to you first, Luke, do you really foresee that being a problem? I kind of worry about, I'm happy that...
Height, you mean?
Yeah, just like having a tall guy, or like a guy that would be a true quote-unquote number 1 receiver that would just, run straight down the field and Randy Moss style.
Before you answer, let me correct something. It's Caleb Jones, not Stacy Coley.
Caleb Jones, that's right.
Yeah.
My bad.
One of them.
Hey, sorry, Stacy. My bad. My mistake.
Which is interesting because that means Caleb Jones could still earn a spot on the roster, and then you just put somebody else in his place for 4 weeks, and it's not really that big a deal.
Right.
Because it's like whichever wide receiver is inactive on Sundays anyways, so who cares?
True.
But yeah, it's an interesting spot. But yeah, to answer your question, it's not. We definitely will not have the tallest receiver core in the league by any stretch of the imagination because Kendall Wright and Diggs are going to be 2 of the biggest guys, and they're both short. Diggs does not play short at all. He has a much bigger catch radius than he should, considering his height, which kind of means that, like, functionally it doesn't matter that he stands up shorter than everybody else. He can jump just as high and still compete for those balls. Thielen's 6'3", Rudolph, I think, is like 6'3" or 6'4", and then you have 6'4" Conklin. So that's a few targets. Not to mention, you can always have Treadwell just stand there and jump. And if you really, do feel like, oh, we don't have height at all, we have this huge problem. Quan Treadwell's 6'4", and if you don't feel like you can use him, then it's a bigger problem. But
and speaking of catch radiuses, Thielen, you can basically throw it at his feet while he's running full speed the other way, and he'll get it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that DiFilippo teaches to his quarterbacks and has, throughout his whole career is to throw those red zone passes face mask or higher. He essentially wants all of them to be jump up and get it balls, which the optimistic side of me says that can actually solve a big problem that Kirk Cousins has in the red zone, which is really, really aggressive tight window throws that are often bad ideas. And I talked about this when we first got Cousins too, like how he fits into the offense is if DiFilippo says, no, throw everything high, that eliminates a lot of turnover risk, which could really, really help us in the red zone. But you have to have those high targets. So we'll see how Conklin does. We'll see if Treadwell can make a third-year leap a la Trae Waynes. And you always have Thielen and Rudolph. Those guys are both tall too. So I think they'll be able to figure out those passes.
Wouldn't it be just super amazing if all of a sudden Treadwell just had this breakout season?
Or was like anyone. I mean, I don't know. He was better than Floyd last year, and he was targeted more than Jarius Wright was last year. So at least there was that. Like, he was the 3rd most targeted wideout on the team. There was that, and he did make some strides in terms of his mechanics and stuff. His releases got a little better, his route running got a little better. There's a lot of film people saying, "Wow, he was open a lot and just was never targeted." That there's merit to that for sure.
That's interesting, though. That it was a pretty good sized margin between second and third on the team, and that just shows you how much they depended upon Thielen and Diggs. That's amazing.
And all of Keenum's reads were half field reads, and which half of the field are you going to go to? The Diggs side or the Treadwell side?
Totally, and that's we talked about this 7 years ago when we did I think our last show, but Cousins is known as a guy who spreads the ball around, and we kind of talked about whether that it was him or whether that was the kind of the system they were employing in Washington. But
could be both.
You definitely feel like if he does spread the ball around, that's going to be, Treadwell should be wide open.
Mm-hmm. And the reason for spreading the ball around, the reason he's better at that is because he's a quick pre-snap reader and he's a quick post-snap reader. So he can survey the field a lot faster than Case Keenum could. As good as the offense was, Pat Shurmur was doing a lot of work to make up for the fact that Case Keenum doesn't read the field very quickly. And Kirk Cousins is a lot better at that. So if you wanted to point at one area where the Vikings got significantly better, it's probably there, which bodes really well for all of the kind of tertiary receivers around Thielen and Diggs.
And he's going to have to, because obviously the conclusion of this podcast is that we're doomed and the offensive line is going to be
a disaster. Be able to catch passes, so there you go. That's even more receivers for Cousins to hit.
Yeah, Brian O'Neill is 6'6" or something like that? Get him out there in the
Jimmy Graham.
I'm telling you, man, move left tackle, reverse to the left tackle. It's going to change football.
So what? We have 4 minutes left. Explain that a little bit. I should have probably asked you at the beginning, but basically you're saying what?
Oh, this is a joke that's not nearly that funny.
Oh, okay.
Greatest question ever.
No, so at Pitt, he actually took some reverses.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious, and I want to see more of it, because that is hilarious and amazing. And also, who would have, all right, you've got the left tackle. He ran wheel routes. It's amazing. He ran a 4.8. This is my bit on him. It's happening.
Yeah,
move left tackle.
I also gave Joe some shit earlier in the show for not getting my joke, and it took me literally the entire show to understand that you were joking. This is all gonna get edited out, but you
absolutely not.
Luke, you prefaced a article that you were writing. I know I have one I wanted to actually I'll just let it be released on Monday. But what sort of stuff do you got coming up? What article are you working on?
Yeah, I have an article that's mostly done. I just need to do the polish on it about why you should never draft kickers. And I also am trying to work on, and I don't know if I'll be able to make this as good of an article as I want it to be. Therefore, I don't know if it'll actually see the light of day, but I'm trying to work on a piece on weight control in football because I find it really interesting how rigorously these guys diet and exercise, especially when you're trying to gain weight. It's crazy, crazy, crazy stuff that they have to do, and unbelievable patience and endurance. And specifically around Brian O'Neill, who I think was 225 when he was at tight end at Pitt, and then they decided to have him. He was 205, and now he's 280.
Wow.
He gained 75 pounds, and still is probably going to put 30 more on to try to play right tackle in the NFL.
Have you seen Matt Burke since he retired?
Is he just tiny?
Yes.
Comparatively?
He's the incredible shrinking man. It's amazing. I mean,
Khalil had a problem with that too. Matt Khalil, his natural weight is 270 because he wanted to be a tight end as well.
There you go, and that's I always use that as something about Khalil. Maybe he just wasn't into the position as much.
He wasn't a scheme fit for what Jeff Davidson did either. In hindsight, now that I know more about it than I did when he was on the team, he was definitely better for his own scheme just in terms of his build, but he was the consensus best tackle in that draft, so they just took him.
Yeah, he always said his favorite part was getting out, on running plays and actually running and kind of getting out
in
the
open
30
space. Pounds over his natural weight, and that made it awkward.
And then he got pneumonia, and then he lost all that weight, and then I don't think he gained most of it back. He tried to be skinny. And there was that center that played in Indianapolis with Peyton Manning, who he's also...
Jeff Saturday?
Yeah, he's 150 pounds now. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. It's on TV. He looks tiny.
Yeah. Joe, do you have any articles you wanted to plug for next week? I actually posted your rookie minicamp and TOC story, which people should definitely check out. It's also on our message board. We are, for the 50th time, attempting to launch our message board, but this time, damn it, it's for real. Check out Joe's article there, but anything else you wanted to kind of...
No, I'm just going to look through my notes from today and see what else I can dig up. Probably do a profile of one of the guys. I got to get to know the rookies since I was AOL during the drafts.
I'm sorry, you were what?
AWOL, excuse me.
Oh, I thought you were trying to say AFK, but messing up the acronym, and I thought it was going to be a great old man mode.
It's not the acronym, but not that one. No, I'm wild, so off the grid. But no, I think there's disparate opinions on the Vikings draft. Some say they could really work out well, and some could say that they not do well. We'll see.
Yeah, and that's kind of what my piece is going to be about on Monday. It's actually going to go a lot deeper than this draft. I have a theory that I'm working on, and if history is any indication, people are going to hate it. So check that out. And like I said, we did relaunch our message board. We're really trying to connect with our readers. The party was part of that. Just communicating, posting our articles, kind of sharing the process. Some of the stuff that we get to see when we go to, for example, on June 9th, I'm going to be able to go hang out with some of the Vikings at an autograph signing. Saw some cool pictures for that. But yeah, definitely follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. Please join our message board. It is the place to be. Otherwise, thank you for listening, and we will be back probably the week after next. But this has been the Purple Journal podcast. Thanks for listening.